Welcome to Indian England News. Our guest today is Dr. Sanjiv Chopra. Many of you must have heard my interview with him in the past about happiness. So, in addition to being a happiness guru, of course, he has written many books. And also, he has a great passion and aficionado for coffee. And just now, he has released his book on coffee. So, we are going to talk to him and we hope that he will give us a guided tour of a coffee around the world, where and historical as well. Where did the coffee start and how it has spread all over the world and how it has become such a popular drink worldwide, and also some of the side effects of coffee as well. So Sanjeev, again, welcome to our show and thank you very much for your time.
I'm absolutely delighted to be on your show. I'm having my third cup of coffee as we are speaking. I don't promote any particular brand of coffee. And we can talk about the legend of coffee. It's a fascinating story.
So
it probably started in the 9th century. There was a village in Ethiopia by the name of Kaffa. And there was a shepherd by the name of Kaldi.
Mm-hmm.
And he would take his sheep for pasture. And he noted in one particular pasture, they were very frisky and animated. These brown red berries. So he made a brew out of it and he really enjoyed it. In the evening, a monk used to walk by to go to his monastery. And he looked at Kaldi and he scolded him. He said, "Kaldi, you have partaken of the devil's fruit." And Kaldi ignored him. And after a while, the monk said, "Let me try it." And he was able to stay up for the late night prayers. It then spread to many different parts of the world. And there's also a very interesting story of how there was a very famous Sufi mystic from India by the name of Badan. And he was revered by both the Hindus and the Muslims. And he went for a pilgrimage to Mecca. Mecca back then, centuries ago, used to be in Yemen. And there he tastes coffee for the first time. And he's totally blown away. And he wants to bring it to India. He used to live in a village near Bangalore. If you imported coffee beans or smuggled them and you were caught, the punishment was death. You could take coffee ground powder, but you couldn't take the beans because then you might start a coffee business wherever you go. So he had a long beard. He smuggled 7 beans inside and he survived in his beard.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to India and this village near Bangalore he started. So India is one of the earliest coffee plantations. Then it spread to Latin America, many different parts of the world. And now coffee is the #1 consumed beverage in the world. There are 2.25 billion cups of coffee consumed every single day. Coca-Cola saw the light, and a couple of years ago, they bought a chain of coffee shops in Europe. If you go to any airport in Europe, you'll see Costa Coffee for $5.3 or $4 billion. Pepsi is coming out with a coffee-infused drink. So the reason for that is more and more research has been forthcoming in the last 20 years that coffee is truly a superfood. As you know, I'm a liver specialist, a hepatologist.
Mm-hmm.
And I got intrigued some 20 years ago when an article appeared in a premier medical journal, and it said coffee drinkers have lower levels of liver enzymes. When you go see your primary care doctor once a year, they check your liver enzymes. If they're elevated, it is usually indicative of some kind of liver damage. Coffee drinkers had lower levels. What does that mean? Who knows? But the next study came and it said there's less scarring in the liver. The next study came out and it said if people consume 2 cups of regular coffee a day, there's a 50% reduction in hospitalization and mortality from chronic liver disease. More than 1 billion people in the world have chronic liver disease. You drink 2 cups of coffee a day, 50% reduction in being admitted to the hospital or dying from chronic liver disease. And then primary liver cancer, which is cancer rising in the liver, is the 3rd leading cause of cancer mortality in the world. 11 countries, including Mongolia and Egypt, it is the #1 cause of cancer death. And if somebody drinks 2 cups of regular coffee a day, 40% reduction in death from primary liver cancer. And then the other studies came, 6 other cancers, diabetes, Parkinsonism, Alzheimer's, gout, dental cavities, death by suicide, good for bone health. So the most recent study, Pendra, I talk about this. I embed it in my liver talks. So my colleagues around the country will send me articles and say, Sanjiv, you've probably already seen this article, but in case you missed it. So a great colleague of mine, Dr. Lord Schnepper, he used to be chief of hematology and oncology at the Beth Israel, a tenured professor at Harvard Medical School, sent me an article. He said, JAMA Oncology, people with advanced colon cancer, metastatic, it's already spread out of the colon, it's in the liver, the lymph nodes, etc., who drink coffee have improved disease-free survival. And it was true for decaf as well. And it was dose dependent. In other words, 3 cups better than 2, 2 better than 1, 4 better than 3.
So what is the optimum number of coffee, a male or female to drink in a day, adult?
I recommend 2 to 4 cups.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Voltaire, the French philosopher, lived to the ripe old age of 83 years when life expectancy was in the 40s. And it's not proof that he lived to 83 because he drank a lot of coffee. But you'll be astounded. He drank 50 cups of coffee a day. And sometimes when I mention this, people say, what? What size, Dr. Chopra? And I say, how does it matter? Even if it's this size, 50 adds up to a lot. Jefferson drank a lot of coffee. Teddy Roosevelt drank a lot of coffee, and his grandson once said, his coffee mug is so big, it is akin to a bathtub. So coffee has been a passion for many people over the years. 2 years ago, $1 billion were invested in America in coffee startups. Now, as you asked earlier, there's some side effects, and we should definitely mention that.
Absolutely, sure.
So people who have heartburn, reflux, gastroesophageal reflux disease, whether you drink regular coffee or decaf, it can make it worse. If you have a tendency for anxiety, you can become more anxious. It can create a slight tremor. It can increase the blood pressure by 2 millimeters. But as you keep drinking coffee, one develops tolerance, and then the blood pressure will not go up. It can lead to insomnia. I have my 4 cups of coffee by 4 o'clock. I will not even dare to have decaf coffee after 4 p.m. I might be up till 3 in the morning. So there are side effects. The side effects are totally dwarfed by all the benefits. If coffee has all these benefits and lowering the risk of 7 cancers, cirrhosis of the liver, diabetes, Parkinsonism, Alzheimer's, the holy grail would be, hey, do people who drink coffee live longer? And the answer is yes. And then it's not one study, it's now 5 studies published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, Lancet, the best medical journals, peer-reviewed. Men and women who drink coffee have lower total and cause-specific mortality. My only refrain when people say, how do you drink it? I say, I make it easy. I drink it black. But if you want to add milk, you want to add sugar, it's okay.
So when it is more effective, like for all these good things we're talking about, with milk or without milk, or with sugar or without sugar?
It has been shown that it doesn't matter. Black or with milk, with sugar, without sugar. The one thing we should never put, artificial sweeteners. We should not drink Diet Coke. It increases the risk of stroke and heart disease 3-fold. So anyone listening, if you're having Diet Coke or putting Splenda or putting some artificial sweetener in your tea or coffee, get rid of it. You won't miss it after 2 weeks. It's an acquired taste. Now, here's the very fascinating study, which is that at the end of our chromosomes, we have something called telomere. It's like at the end of my shoelace, I have a piece of plastic. to prevent the shoelace from fraying. Telomeres prevent the chromosomes from fraying and sticking to each other. If we look at the length of the chromosomes, we can predict how long people are going to live. Shortened telomeres are linked with accelerated aging, and people may die 8 years, 10 years earlier. Who has shortened telomeres? Mothers of chronically severely disabled children, the stress day in, day out, and caregivers of people with Alzheimer's, the loved one taking care, not the person with Alzheimer's. He or she is clueless. Who has longer telomeres? And by inference, we're going to live longer. People who exercise, people who are on the Mediterranean diet, people who meditate, and people who drink coffee. And the interesting thing about coffee, it's a large study, thousands of people, that increased caffeine intake is linked with shortened telomeres. Increased coffee intake is linked with longer telomeres. So it's not the caffeine. Coffee has 1,000 constituents.
Okay, now, since most of our audience and viewers are of Indian origin, I have to bring tea here as well. So how do you compare tea versus coffee?
Yeah, so, I happen to give a keynote maybe for the last 20 years in a row in Anaheim, California. It's a 3-day conference. I've been the course director, and then every year I give the keynote and I live a talk. And there's 7,000 clinicians in the audience. And obviously there are lots of Indian doctors.
Sure.
300-400. And after my talk, they'll come, we talk, we've become friends over the years. And they'll say, Dr. Chopra, especially the people from North India, you didn't say anything about tea. And I tell them that there are only 3 studies I'm aware of about the benefits of tea, actually 2. And one is that there's less carotid artery in the neck, there's less calcification, and therefore by inference, less stroke. And now an article appeared that there may be less stroke as well. And there's less calcification, not only in the coronary artery, but there's also maybe, and therefore less stroke, there may be less cognitive decline. So less chance of getting Alzheimer's. But the coffee, the studies are 100. And so I say to them, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It may be that when more and more studies are done on tea, it'll turn out to be as good, maybe better than coffee. But for the time being, I drink coffee. My wife, it's taken me 20 years, and she still has her first cup of tea in the morning, but she's slowly drifted to having 1.5 to 2 cups of coffee during the day. Then I come back to Anaheim a year later, and a whole bunch of these Indian doctors come up to me and say, Dr. Chopra, you'll be glad to know I'm drinking 2 cups of coffee a day. So I've converted a few.
Sure. So, I have one, with my personal experience, again, being in North India, I go there all the time. I had tea, never heard of coffee, actually never had taken coffee there. Now, slowly, but again, when I take a tea, I have to put sugar into that. Without sugar, I don't like tea. So then I decided to cut my sugar off. And then I found by totally accident that I could drink black coffee without sugar.
Yeah, interesting.
And I started to take the coffee, without sugar. And I like that. It was easy also because in the office, you just have hot water, put instant coffee, and your coffee is ready. You don't need sugar or anything else. Now, later on, I found that also it, developed some sort of acidity with coffee. So if you can just talk about that as well.
Sure. So coffee is made from the roasted beans of coffee, and it has a protein inside. And from that roasted protein, it leads to stimulation of a hormone made in the stomach. And that hormone is called gastrin, Gastrin. And it promotes acid secretion. It has nothing to do with the caffeine content. So decaf coffee has the same effect on increased acid secretion. Now, acid secretion is fine. Acid is what prevents bacteria from hurting us. We ingest bacteria in the food all the time. Gastric acid is an important trap mechanism. However, you don't want that acid. You want that acid to help digest the food, kill the bacteria, and then move downstream. Many of us have at the lower end of our food pipe, the esophagus, all of us have a sphincter. It's called the lower esophageal sphincter. And many of us, as we grow older, this sphincter becomes weak, becomes incompetent. Its only job, the moment I start to drink something, even before it reaches from my mouth to the lower part of the esophagus, the sphincter opens up right away. As soon as the bolus of food or liquid goes into the stomach, it's supposed to close. But if people have a weak sphincter, the acid comes upstream, leads to heartburn, and on rare occasions can lead to serious complications. So I, by the way, Ubendra, have had heartburn for 30 years. I still drink 4 cups of coffee a day. And I take a medicine at night to counteract the acid. And because the benefits of coffee are so great, outweigh all the minor side effects.
Okay. Now, also, if you look at the coffee totally as a business, and there is a whole chain of businesses, you start with a farming, a small family, then you go to, the big conglomerates, who manufacture coffee and, make the powders and all this stuff. Then you have all these retail shops and workers. If you put in terms of, business chain overall, the contribution of coffee to the world economy, how will you put that?
Oh, it is huge. The contribution of coffee to the world economy is huge. Millions and millions of people in the world are employed in the production of coffee. There's a very interesting author, I'm trying to remember his name, but he used to go to a coffee shop in New York. And he would always make friends with the barista and talk to them and say thank you for the coffee. And then at dinner, he announced to his family, his kids, that we have to thank everyone who's responsible for the food here. The bread, who baked the bread, who delivered it by a truck, who stored it on the shelf, who at the checkout counter took your money. So his daughter said, hey, you drink coffee. How many people are involved in the production of coffee? He actually visited multiple continents and he wrote a book. And he discovered that for you and me to have a cup of coffee, maybe 1,000 people are involved in the chain. And the book is called 1,000 Thanks. It's an amazing little short book, became New York Times bestseller. So just imagine, for that 1 cup of coffee, who made the paper cup, who made the sleeve, who made the lid, who roasted the coffee, who grew the coffee, who transported it, who stocked it. It's pretty astounding. So millions and millions of people are involved and have a livelihood. The one thing we have to be careful about is to make sure that these people are getting their due share. And there are some companies, and I will declare that I'm on the board of a company called Purity Coffee. And I told them when I joined the board, I'm not going to promote your coffee. There's no study saying your coffee is better than other coffees, but I can talk about the health benefits of coffee, nuts, exercise, vitamin D, meditation, make it more inclusive. Now, what some of these companies do is they're very socially conscious, and they're paying the farmers very good amount of money. Purity is not the only one. There are many such companies.
So now let us focus a little bit on how to. So for example, if somebody watched this interview and they get very inspired, oh, I'm going to really try coffee because it's very helpful and beneficial. So says Dr. Sanjiv Chopra. So where that person should really start? If I'm just new and I want to explore coffee, get into really detail.
Yeah, so I think the key is to start small, to start with half a cup or a cup of coffee, start with black, try and get organic coffee, try different brands. Some brands you will find very bitter. Others you'll say, wow, this is very refreshing. So try different brands. Initially, don't add milk or sugar, but if you find it bitter and you want to add a little bit of hot milk or 1 spoon of sugar, fine. Go ahead. And then slowly escalate and see if you can get up to 2 to 4 cups of regular coffee a day. Decaf also has benefits, but not as profound.
Mm-hmm.
And in liver disease, cirrhosis of the liver, it appears that regular coffee is protective, not decaf. Now, here's an amazing study. One has to drink a pint of whiskey a day or a liter of wine a day for 25 years. And then there's a 20% chance of getting alcoholic cirrhosis.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the other 80%? Mm-hmm. And we used to think, oh, they've got better genes, or maybe the way they metabolize the alcohol, enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. It turns out it's coffee. So if you drink a pint of whiskey a day for 30 years, and you drink 1 cup of regular coffee a day, 20% reduction in alcoholic cirrhosis, 2 cups, 40%, 4 cups, 80%, 5 cups, you won't get it. Now, it's not a license to drink heavily and drink coffee. It'll protect your liver, but you can, fry your brain, get cardiomyopathy, pancreatitis, lose your job, ruin your marriage, kill people on the road, but it protects the liver.
Now, let's talk about instant coffee versus coffee from the beans, freshly made.
Yeah, I think I haven't seen a good study comparing instant coffee, but there is one study from Europe, which was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. In that same issue of the journal, there were 2 studies on coffee and 1 editorial. And one of the studies was from Europe, where they had 10 different European countries. And in aggregate, more than 500,000 subjects studied. In these 10 European countries, they make the coffee differently. They drink it differently. It didn't make a difference. Lower total and cause-specific mortality, both in men and women. The other article in that same issue of the Annals of Internal Medicine studied, it was from Hawaii, and studied about 250,000 subjects. It didn't matter what your ethnicity was, whether you were Asian American, African American, white Caucasian, Hispanic, low total cause-specific mortality, men and women.
Now let's come to the retail. So coffee from Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, regular shop. Is there any difference? Do you find anyone better? I mean, I will not. I just want to make sure that it will not constitute to the endorsement, but we just wanted your opinion.
Yeah. So for years and years, I met a dear friend of mine, Venkat Srinivasan, whom you know.
Sure, of course.
At a Starbucks. That's how I met him. And then we would meet every day on the way to work at 6:30 in the morning. So it became sort of a ritual. And then when COVID hit, we would meet in the parking lot of a Starbucks, go through the drive-through and sit 6 feet away with my window rolled down, his window rolled down, drink our coffee and talk about life. I've been going to other coffee shops more recently, including one in Sudbury called Sudbury Coffee Works, which has very good coffee. There's a breakfast place called Farmer's Daughter in Sudbury, and they have wonderful Guatemalan coffee. Now, believe it or not, McDonald's has very good coffee, and it's $1. And there was a blind tasting some years ago. And I think it got hushed up. But they had McDonald's, they had Dunkin' Donuts, they had Starbucks, they had a few other coffees and blind tasters. And most of them preferred McDonald's. So every now and then I'm going through McDonald's, I get a large coffee.
Someone recently mentioned this to me because, there is Dunkin' Donuts. Of course, there are Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, both very close to my office. And So somehow I tried a couple of times Starbucks, but I find it very bitter and also
Yeah.
I go to
Not
Dunkin' Donuts and I love that coffee. So I
Yeah.
was telling somebody, I really love this Dunkin' Donut coffee. And this friend said, have you tried the coffee from McDonald's? And I said, no, I've not tried.
You should
And he
try.
said that, you should try from. So now, again, since you are saying that, I'm going to try McDonald's as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Every time I go by past McDonald's, I'm tempted to go through the drive-through and get a coffee. It's so good. And in the summer, sometimes I'll even do this. I'm on my way to work and it's summer and it's a hot summer day. I get a medium black hot coffee and I get a large iced coffee. And the only time I add sugar is when I'm having iced coffee.
So now, other question for you before I let you go. Let's come back to your book. And I know the foreword in the book is written by your celebrity brother, Deepak Chopra. And it's about 80 pages book. So one can read it in one day.
Yeah.
So tell us, how did you come with this idea about the book and where one can buy this book?
So, I've been talking about coffee for a long, long time. And I find that even my physician colleagues will say, Sanjiv, but wasn't there a study that linked pancreatic cancer to coffee published in the New England Journal of Medicine some 25 years ago? I'll say, yeah, it was published. And then it was recanted. And there were 6 other studies published in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed no link between coffee and pancreatic cancer. But here's the reality. Negativity is very heavily weighted. And the other refrain, if you go tomorrow to your primary care physician and say, I talked to Sanjiv Chopra and he said, coffee is good. It's the magical elixir, no risk of cancer. He or she is likely to say, everything in moderation. These studies come and go. For coffee, they have not been coming and going. They've been coming and coming and coming. And the more coffee you drink, the better off you are. So Voltaire, the French philosopher, once said, not Voltaire, I'm thinking of who said it. Schopenhauer, German philosopher, once said, all truth goes through 3 phases. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Here's my prediction. In 5-10 years from now, people will say, oh yeah, we always knew coffee was an amazing superfood. What's the big deal? But it takes time for these things to percolate and for people to embrace it. And especially the scientific community tends to be very skeptical. But everything I've written in the book, it's about 100 pages, is based on fact with references, which journal published what study. And Deepak and I grew up in New Delhi, and we stayed with our uncle, Ratan Chacha, while we were going to St. Columbus High School. Our father was posted in Jammu. They wanted us to finish our schooling in New Delhi at St. Columbus High School, preeminent all-boys school. And Ratan Chacha was a Renaissance man. He knew philosophy, he knew music, he knew poetry, he knew literature, he knew his coffee. He would go to Delhi Coffee House every morning on the way to work, meet with the intelligentsia of New Delhi, including Kushwant Singh, the editor of the Illustrated Weekly of India, other journalists. And on his way back from work, he would go back to the coffee house before coming home. And then he would regale Deepak and me about stories. And he took Deepak and me, I was 12 years of age, to the iconic Delhi Coffee House. And that's why my love of coffee started.
Sanjiv, talking about these coffee houses, I think this is the only thing I've seen only in India, that every major intellectual city in India has a coffee house.
Yeah.
Even now I remember that I went to Allahabad University, and in Allahabad, one of the most beautiful, civil lines area, there was a coffee house.
Yeah.
And that was again gathering place of all the intellectuals and
it is. Coffee brings that out, collegial, friendship, creativity. There was a time in places in Europe where if you wanted to pick your mail, it wasn't delivered to your house. It was delivered to the coffee house that you frequented. So you went to the coffee house you not only got your coffee, but you also got your daily mail.
Excellent. So now, Sanjiv, I will come towards the end of
So
the
you,
interview.
sorry, you also asked, where's the book available? So the book is called Coffee, the Magical Elixir, Facts That Will Astound and Perk You Up. And it's on Amazon.
Excellent.
And it's Kindle and, whatever.
Okay, excellent. So now your last word on coffee and happiness. I have to ask you about happiness.
So in happiness, I have said that the 4 keys to happiness are having a cadre of good friends, your chosen family. You mentioned my brother wrote the foreword. I couldn't choose my brother. I couldn't choose my parents, but I can choose my friends. A friend is a gift you give to yourself. Second is ability to forgive. If you have bitterness or rancor in your heart, you cannot be happy. Third thing is doing things for others. Be of service, philanthropy, nurturing, mentoring. Philanthropy I define as love for humanity. And it's 3 T's. Most people think of money, treasure, but it's treasure, time, talent. If you can share any of those 3 things, you're philanthropic. Friends, forgiveness for others, and the 4th, gratitude. So what is better than having coffee with a friend? That will produce astounding happiness. When I wrote the dedication to my uncle Ratan Chacha, my son Bharat said, Dad, you should also dedicate the book to Venkat. He's one of your best friends. You met him at a coffee shop. You have traveled to many places in the world. So I added Venkat. And
I did see his name there, yes.
And he said, no, do it to you, to Amita, do it to your parents, do it to your children, your grandchildren. I said, Venkat, I've written more than 1 book. All of them have been dedicated to, this is for you. So he was very touched. He's such a dear friend. He inspires me with his philanthropy and his brilliance.
Okay, Sanjiv, thank you very much as usual. Always nice to chat with you. And whenever I see anything, read anything about happiness, I always think about your past conversation about happiness.
Thank you so much.